Live from New York. It's Monday afternoon. I know it doesn't have the same ring to it as Saturday night, and well, forgive the pun on that, but we are in fact live from New York City instead of Washington, D.C. as we normally are here. You may have seen earlier this afternoon, I was on a panel with Senator Ernst and KT McFarland at Fox News, and I'm going to be on another one, News Nation, here in an hour or so. But in between, I wanted to take this opportunity to bring a special show here because there has been some movement on the ground both in Ukraine and a little bit of movement maybe even in Washington among some of our leaders, though not enough, because people are starting to realize the truth. But I'm going to give you some of the ground truth that maybe they're slowly coming to realize, and we better hope they get it faster because a lot of people's lives are in the balance, and our national security could be negatively impacted if they keep going. Is not changing any of his views, and that is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
All leaders and international organizations must respond to Russia's actions. And the response must be tough. Putin does not want any peace. He only wants war and death. He does not care whom he kills. The main goal is to destroy. First Ukraine and Ukrainians, and then you, dear partners. That is why it is a matter of survival, and not only for Ukraine, that the world reacts to Russian evil and exerts pressure and hits back.
So it's a lot of these common things about Russia's evil. We know that they're invading his country. His viewpoint is clear on that, but then he's keeping on trying that same thing he's been doing, which is to tell you that it matters for you because he's coming after you next. Now, as I've told you 100 times, and we'll add one more for anybody who's new to this channel, there is no chance that that Russia could move beyond Ukraine. There's very little chance that they could even completely take the whole country of Ukraine. There is no chance, no possibility that they could conventionally move into NATO countries into the West. So they're not coming after us, period. This is not even in the cards. Now, another one who's maybe getting a little bit, but still missing some big parts there and echoing Zelensky's call about Ukraine, Russia being evil, is former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
They're fighting for their democracy and fighting for our democracy. We need to send the resources to the Ukraine. And I want the people to know that Russia has been very evil, whether it's kidnapping children, raping women, killing families, and all the rest. But also, their army is bigger now than it was when it went into Ukraine. They are building, using money from people who are escaping sanctions and the rest. And getting help from Iran and from China and other places to build their technology. So we'll win in Ukraine. We must. We have to send the money. We must.
So she starts off there pretty good, talking about things that are real. She talks about how the Russian side is bigger than it was, how the Ukraine side is not making advances, how they failed in their summer offensive and in other kinds of issues there, and that they don't have the capacity that they need to even come close to potentially pushing Russia out. She's good with that, and then inexplicably says, oh, we're going to win. There's no rationale. If she had laid out some kind of ground truth reality that said, hey, this is a plausible plan here, then you could maybe say, well, I think you're reaching there, but there's no.
There is no way that the Russian Federation takes Ukraine, all of Ukraine, half of Ukraine, and that was Putin's goal from the beginning, was to carve it up into at least half the country, including Kyiv. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. On the other side of it, the reality of it is that Ukraine is small compared to Russia in terms of size and its ability to bring scale, its ability to force conscript people. So neither kind. I'm just being honest. And in the past, I have tried not to talk about this publicly because I thought it undermined the leverage that Ukraine had. But now it's the reality. Neither side is going to be able to achieve victory as defined in the most idealistic terms.
Of course Ukraine can win. Of course Ukraine has already succeeded militarily in one of the most profound objectives it had, which was to keep the country from falling into Russian hands. It has already done that, and Ukraine can go further in retaking territory that Russia has occupied.
Сказал, что Украина – это не Россия. Вот эта концепция должна исчезнуть навсегда. Украина – это, безусловно, Россия. Должны кануть в небытие и попытки игнорировать российское общественное мнение. Оно справедливо считает Украину и ее население частью нашей общерусской цивилизации. Не попади вот та самая Украина в глупейшую ловушку, которую расставили Соединенные.
Okay, I'm sorry we had some technical difficulties there, but hopefully we got them squared now. What you've been able to see in that is that, look, you have Rubio is recognizing something that we're not going to work. It's not happening. Then you've got Pelosi, who says all these things and recognizes Russia's not winning, or that Ukraine's not winning, but then somehow that Ukraine's going to win anyway. It doesn't make any sense. And in fact, when you look at what's been happening on the ground, you can see why Medvedev, Russia's leader, is very cocky and very confident that they're going to take a lot more territory. So they're not even thinking stalemate anymore. They're talking about what they can continue to go on. And unfortunately, there's more reality and more possibility that he's right than all the Western leaders are right. And I'm about to explain to you why that is. But one of the first ways I'm going to show you is something that, so many people talked about earlier was going to be a game changer. And that the Abrams tanks that we send in there, the Bradleys and the Challengers and all this other kind of things that we talked about, we're going to be game changers. But they're not. And if you've been watching our channel, I told everyone all the way through that they're not. Why they're not. They burn like anything else, as this shows right here.
Today we have two geolocated confirmed videos of destroyed Abrams and Abrams-based machine. For example, on this video we can see the burning of one more M1115 assault breacher engineering machine on Abrams Classic. A few weeks ago or a few days ago we got the video of how the Russians managed to destroy another let's say armored vehicles of the type, and this is very interesting information because this is not the main purpose or goal of this type of weapon. They shouldn't be located on the line of combat contact. Their main purpose is to do engineering stuff, but not to support infantry, not to support defense forces or something like this. This video confirms that Ukrainians have significant problems with armored vehicles, and now they are forced to use the Western most modern weapon like Abrams and Abrams-based machines.
So you see that they're using Abrams tanks and Abrams platforms in ways they're supposed to be not used at all. Those things are supposed to be for support and for breakthrough and for engineering purposes on those right now. But instead, they're being used just to support because they're running out of everything else. And that is the problem, because that exposes that there is across the board all kinds of problems with what the Ukraine side is doing. Listen, this is not a matter of capacity, of capability, of courage, of willingness to fight, any of those things. It has to do with raw combat power. The things that the Russians have on their side, the things that the Ukrainian side has on their side are just not equal. And they're going to continue to be more and more out of balance in the Russian favor as time goes on. And I'm going to lay out just a handful of really fundamental, practical things that is on the ground that tells you why that is. One of the first ones right there was just mentioned in that video, engineering equipment. The Ukraine side does not have anywhere near enough engineering equipment to even make defenses now. Now, last year we talked about how their absence of engineering equipment meant that they were not able to penetrate the Russian defenses. Now then, because Ukraine is on the defensive side, they don't have the capacity to build good defenses. So whereas Russia spent more than a half a year preparing for that offensive, the Ukraine side didn't spend any time. And that's another operational problem on the Ukraine side, that when they had a chance to go to the defensive last November, December, when apparently former Commander Zelensky asked for it, Zelensky said, no, we're going to stay on the offensive because we have to keep going. Well, now they're paying the price for that. because they don't have the time to build as Russia is pushing along the entire front line. And they also now have insufficient engineering assets. So they're literally, you're talking about shovels. They're trying to build defensive positions on the fly with shovels as they're holding these artillery rounds that are coming in, the drones, etc. Russia is also learning a lot in the counter drone operations, electronic warfare. So you see these FPV drones you hear all the time, the suicide drones, all over the place, but you're seeing fewer of those videos on the Ukraine side. And the reason is because Russia is adapting and learning how to knock them out of the sky with electronic means before they ever get to the target, so that Russia is now suffering fewer losses while they are inflicting more losses in the opposite direction. Then there's the problem with the personnel. You may have seen some videos of large-scale mobilization, or at least the desire to have large-scale mobilization in Ukraine. The problem is they don't have the number of personnel. So now then there's lots of video out there where people are literally grabbing them off the streets. There's been a couple of times recently where the Ukrainian people who were doing the mobilization were killed because they're trying to force people to go, and they're fighting back because they view it, many of them, as a suicide mission. And they don't want to commit suicide, they want to live. So they're now pushing back. But that tells you that they don't have enough people even to plug the gaps. Now, that's compounding another big problem that they have with personnel, in that because as soon as they get people, they have to throw them onto the line. Some in recent weeks have been killed within days of being taken off the street because they were then thrown into the front line. Ukraine doesn't have the time or the resources to train these people. And I cannot more strongly reinforce, you've heard me say a lot, it's men, not machines, not money, it's men. And when you don't have the manpower, the trained manpower and the experienced manpower to put onto the line on top of all the machines and on top of all the ammunition, then you're just side does have those things. And Russia has 5 times more military age males from which to choose and from which to pull. They have done something pretty smart in some areas. That they took a lot of the people that they did recruit over the last year or so, and they have kept them out of contact, training as a unit, which is what I advocated that the Ukraine side did on the 3rd month of the war. But they chose not to. They went a different path, and the Russians didn't. The Russians chose this path, and now it's starting to pay dividends because they're moving forward, and they have more people volunteering to fight. They aren't having to go into any more forced mobilizations like they did in the fall of 2022. That's a big issue. Second thing is the equipment that they have. You may have seen some reports of late that the maintenance level, another thing that we warned about early on in this war, it's not just getting machines, you have to keep them maintained, and it's really hard to do. Aside from enemy actions, aside from what you're getting shot down and things are blowing up in artillery and minefields and that sort, you have to keep what you have maintained so that it continues to function, because it's just grueling out there, is my guess. And if you don't have people that are trained in maintenance, and that's at multiple levels, at the user level, it's what's called depot level, which is the higher level, and where it's like replacing or fixing an engine, that kind of thing. Ukraine doesn't have it. The West didn't supply it. We never had that. We didn't make it last that long. We never thought it was going to. So there was no plan for it. That's another failure of the West we can talk about later. But they don't have the ability. Now that bill is coming due because large percentages of their fleets can't even get into battle because they don't have the spare parts for it. They can't get it fixed. And now that, especially in artillery, they're having to go back to some of the blown up carcasses out there on the battlefield to pull pieces off to try to get some of the other ones going on. You cannot win a war if you're mobile, if you're cannibalizing dead artillery pieces. You see that, right? I mean, that shouldn't be hard to figure out for our leaders. Another thing on the personnel side, you had, of course, we talked a bit about this too, that President Zelensky a month or so ago fired his commander-in-chief Zelensky because he didn't like the way things were going. He was basically blaming him for the thing failing. So he put in a guy named Syrskyi. Well, now Syrskyi has gone and he fired a bunch of, they had like a purge of all the generals that were loyal to Zelensky because he wanted somebody loyal to Syrskyi. But now they went a step further and he's actually firing brigade commanders, which is down at the tactical level. He has twice, at least in the recent week, blamed the leaders for failing to do their job, and so he's replacing them. Well, listen, let me tell you, that just kills motivation. When the guys who are fighting and they know that they don't have enough ammunition, they don't have enough weapons, and they don't have enough men. And then the Russian side's coming on with guarantee you, make you not want to continue to fight. Then now let's get the issue of the U.S. Congress. So we continue to talk about whether or not the House is going to cut loose this $60 billion package. Folks, money is not the problem. And I keep hearing over and over. In fact, Gary, if you could replay that one by Jake Sullivan again, because there's an important piece of what he says there that's important to point out now.
Of course, Ukraine can win. Of course, Ukraine has already succeeded militarily in one of the most profound objectives it had, which was to keep the country from falling into Russian hands. It has already done that. And Ukraine can go further in retaking territory that Russia has occupied.
He's talking they can go further to retaking territory when they can't even hold on to what they have. And he's saying as long as the Congress gets that money. Well, let's just look at that for a second. First of all, what is that money supposed to buy? Because I hear Sullivan and I hear all these other officials, the Secretary of State, the Deputy Secretary of State, keep talking about how that money is going to go into our pockets. And it's going to go into American business. But what about going to Ukraine? Now, eventually, some of that could result in shells. But folks, would you make contracts now when you're releasing money now? It's many months, if not years. In some cases, it definitely is years before even artillery shells make it to the front. So thing coming to the front, it's just waiting on Congress to break loose with this money, unless the U.S. goes into more of our national security and takes more of our existing tanks and artillery pieces and shells, etc. I guess that's a theoretical possibility, but that's not something that you want, because that's going to continue to weaken our own national security. But even if they did, consider this fact also. So in the first 18 months of the war, the U.S. gave a loan 5,000 various kinds of military machines, tanks, armor personnel carriers, supply trucks, the like, vehicles, 5,000 of them. And then, of course, millions of artillery shells, hundreds of millions of ammunition of other types, long-range rockets, medium-range rockets, air defense interceptors, air defense systems, all this stuff. What happened with all that? What did that do on the battle? Even line, basically. That's what they took. And now that even today, that village is now almost completely retaken. And there's a whole bunch of others. Avdiivka, of course, recently that had been in Ukraine control since 2014. Those are gone. And now, because they didn't dig the defensive last year when they had a shot, now that Russia's continuing to put the pressure on, moving more forward and more forward. So if $200 billion given by the U.S. and the West and all of those thousands of vehicles and ammunition did not dent the line then, by what logic, by what our leaders today artillery. So how does anyone want to say that that will be a difference? How can the National Security Advisor come on national television, look you in the eye and say, hey, we just need this or it's going to fail, or they're not going to win? And if they do, then they can take back territory when $200 billion didn't result in taking back territory. It doesn't make any sense. And plus, you've lost hundreds of thousands of more troops since that time. You're now grabbing people off the streets of Ukraine. Folks, you can't make an army like that. You can't do that on the fly. And by the way, MI6, the intelligence group for the British, is saying today that there is evidence that Russia is stockpiling large numbers of long-range missiles so that they can have a big offensive in May, June, on top of what they're doing right now. They have troops that are poised, in a couple of cases, 100,000 or 50,000 in one area, 60,000 in another. Where they're going to be employed, who knows? What they're going to do, who knows? But they are in these areas here. There's some evidence that in the northern part, in the Sumy region, that there's some evidence on the ground that something could be on the way up there. But every way you want to look at it, the longer our leaders keep telling you Ukraine is going to win, we just need this money. And then when we get it, they'll find a new excuse because the Russians are on the move. And you see Medvedev, just very confident commentary on there. You hear Putin making these very brash commentary because he knows what I'm telling you. Everything is in their favor, economically, militarily, diplomatically, politically. There's all this news here in the last week or so about the West fracturing itself, and the German chancellor revealing what the French and the UK were doing behind the scenes when they claimed they weren't doing anything on the ground in Ukraine. Now we know they are. And then in turn, the UK side apparently leaks that the Germans are, despite what Schultz said, is also doing things on the ground for the Ukraine side against Russia, which brings up all these other issues. And then you've seen, we show this video of Russia rolling around ICBM nuclear missiles through their cities, and Putin talking about how he's going to, use that if anybody wants to go to war with him. Why would we even want to touch that kind of situation? Why would we want to pretend that there's a positive outcome when the negative side could result in a nuclear escalation? It's insane. This doesn't help Ukraine, folks. Let me just be point blank. This does not help Ukraine. Pretending that things aren't the way they are is just going to get more Ukrainians killed, lose more Ukrainian territory. If they do the right thing, the smart thing, the wise thing right now, and recognize the truth that I've just laid out, it's plainly obvious for anyone who's willing to see what's true. Try to end a war where it's at right now, and before we're fairly negative, but still positive, in that they could have held on to all of their territory and there wouldn't have been a war. In terms that they could have gotten in November or in March and April of 2022 after the war started were even worse, but still they would have been in control of a lot of their territory. The deal that they're going to get today, if they do what I'm suggesting, is going to be much worse than they would have gotten in April of 2022, but not near as bad as what it's going to be 5-6 months from now if they still don't do what's right. Listen, I understand Zelensky but at some point, folks, it doesn't matter. Government are supporting something that can't be done. And the longer we wait, the worse it's going to get for our friend and ally in Ukraine. That is your deep dive for today. Folks, we're going to ask you to come back again because we got some great stuff coming up for you later this week. We've got John Mearsheimer on Wednesday. We have Mike Domino, former CIA officer. Matthew Ho, also a former State Department official, always gives us some great insight on some stuff. You're not going to want to miss any one of these shows. So come back tomorrow. Remember to like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss stuff like this, because I'm telling you, you don't get the truth like this from almost any other channel. So we're going to keep bringing it to you because we are unafraid and unintimidated. And we will see you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.